This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Eldorado Gaming. Eldorado Gaming is your site for gifts and gaming accessories like dice, playmats, and other items to bling out your games. Use the promo code META for 10% off your order. Find us on YouTube at Eldorado Gaming TX or our home site at eldoradogaming.com. Here at My Mythical Meta, we talk about gaming with friends and strangers, resolving conflicts, and keeping game nights fun, interesting, and recurring. Our game of choice is Magic the Gathering, but our hope is that what we share is relevant for board gamers, RPG groups, video gamers, and maybe even your poker night. I'm Travis, and with my brother Benjamin and my friends Derek and Randy, we've been playing Magic together since 2014. The secret to a healthy meta is not in the game you play, it's being good friends. Subscribe to My Mythical Meta, presented by Eldorado Gaming, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to My Mythical Meta. This is the finale episode of Season 1. It should be coming out January 1st, and we will be back Season 2 mid-January. We are taking a week off from recording, and when we come back, we will have a new season in store for you. We can't wait. This has been an awesome first year for My Mythical Meta. My name is Travis, and I'm joined by the entire crew today. I've got my brother Benjamin.
Hello.
I've got Randy.
Howdy.
And my good friend Derek.
Hello.
The entire crew is here for this wonderful finale episode. Guys, it's been an awesome ride starting a podcast with you guys.
Yeah, I can't. It's already been, I guess, a year and a half, 20 episodes, 22 episodes.
A year and a half?
6 months.
No, a year
6 months.
and a half. I don't know. I'm blacking out. I hit that time warp back in
It's been 6 months.
back in September.
It's been about 6 months. I was reminiscing earlier today, looking back at past episodes. Our first episode was released 7/24, so late July.
Been a wild ride.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun, and I can't wait to keep going with this. I have a great time every week catching up with you guys and talking about games, and I hope you guys do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
This finale episode is where we are going to discuss our Secret Santa Magic the Gathering decks. This is a tradition that we have done for 5 years now. It has us reaching outside the box, thinking of strategies that we wouldn't normally use, and something that I think is important for a meta, it encourages us to consider the other players and to look at where the other players are in their gameplay, in their strategy, in their style. What do you guys think of when you're thinking of your next Secret Santa deck?
For me,
really... Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. For me, it's about who I'm building for. Like for this year, I built for Benjamin. And when I build for Benjamin, I want to do things he doesn't normally do or things he does well, like wacky ideas or a non-linear gameplay. Like it's not just focused on combat damage, even though these are budget decks and that's usually how they win. But for Randy, I'll probably do something like a big creature, and Travis, I'll try to put like a little flavor or fun little mechanic or something like that. So that's what I think of, and then I kind of think of the colors that you guys like. Like I know Benjamin likes black and blue, Randy likes red and white, Travis, you're kind of a mixed bag, but you like to do red a lot. And then sometimes I'll just add green because that's what I know best.
Yeah. Benjamin, how about you?
It really depends on the challenge and on the person. Like, if I'm building for Travis, it's really hard to think of a specific thing that you lack. And so I'm often trying to do something that's very mechanically cool or just really outside the box that you would never build yourself, which, of course, sometimes leads to complicated messes. But
yeah, that Archelaus deck is still something I can't quite put
Still
together.
your white turtle.
Yeah.
right. If I'm building for Randy, the first time it was just trying to build something that, like, to try to develop certain skills or whatever. But now it's more like I take inspiration from the things that he's been trying to do for a long time and then trying to put it all together. Same thing with Derek, really. Like, I try to get into their head and do a twist on it. Like, hey, these are the types of decks they build. Let's do something just a little off the wall. It's their style, but different, you know?
Yeah.
And so it does give me a challenge. Now, there are some challenges, like this one in particular, where there were so many possibilities for what we were doing that I kind of took inspiration from something that Randy's been trying to do, and then the deck kind of built itself. So I'm sure we'll get more into that in a second, but sometimes the challenge guides the deck instead of the person guiding the deck.
Yeah. Randy, what goes on in your head when you're thinking of a Secret Santa deck?
It's a lot of what Derek and Ben said. It depends on what, restrictions we put on ourselves. Or themes, that we decide on as a group. I feel like in years past, I usually went with colors that the person has used the least. For you, it's hard because you have 30 decks or whatever it is.
Right, yeah.
And so you have a lot of colors pretty well covered. A couple years ago when I did Benjamin, white and red Boros was definitely the furthest from his wheelhouse, I would say. He does a lot of more black, white, blue. I'd say is more his wheelhouse. So doing white and red and getting there's no fancy infinite token life gain mechanics. It is put a creature on board, suit him up, beat someone to death.
Smash face as fast as possible.
And it became a monster.
Yeah. Most of the time when I am working on a Secret Santa deck, I look at the other person and I try to find what colors they've used the least. This year was an exception. This year, I built the deck with our special deck building rule without even knowing who I was going to have. I just had a spark of creativity and just built the deck, and it didn't matter who it was going to. It was going to be a lot of fun. So our Secret Santa decks always have a $50 budget, and this inherently limits the power of these decks. One, we use a $50 budget because it's a Christmas gift. And we're taking from our own collections, and in some cases, buying new cards for the deck. The $50, though, also keeps it in the realm of what we're comfortable with in our meta, which is usually less on the combo side, more on the combat damage. I've described in the past our meta as pro wrestling. We like big moves that do cool stuff, and $50 lets us do that. And it also, in some cases, brings our attention to cards we wouldn't normally use because we're trying to keep the budget at that limit. And now we'll get to the really fun part of this year. And like I said, this deck building challenge, this special rule, it totally drove my deck building this year. I did not have a single thought about who it was going to. So here was our special deck building rule. Any two monocolored legendary creatures could be treated as though they have partner. This is a special rule that means they can both be your commander, and it means that your deck has the color identities of both. So we knew that we were going to be building two color decks, and it meant that if you were going to be focused on one particular commander, you could use cards from a second color. And that's what really busted the deck building wide open. Yeah. Now we know that that's crazy powerful.
Oh, we do now.
Oh yeah, we definitely do now. And the rules of Commander included color identity to be a restriction. Restriction breeds creativity. Part of Commander's mission statement is about creative deck building and expressing yourself. So we know that adding in a color and having two creatures in your command zone means that you're starting with a hand of 9. Your opening hand has 9 cards in it instead of only 7, because 2 of those cards are in your command zone. So we know that that's really powerful, and that was exactly the point. We wanted to see what crazy combinations could be thought up. The $50 budget proved, I think, to limit the power of games like we expected, even though, we did have some fast and powerful moves going on. If you heard that deck building rule and started thinking of all the crazy, wacky things you could do, please give us a comment or send us an email, because we want to see what other insane deck combinations could have come up with this deck building rule. So again, that was any two monocolored legendary creatures can be treated as though they have partner. We had one major restriction, which was that you could not use either version of Sakashima.
Right.
That is a legendary creature that basically comes in as a clone of another creature. So you had to have 2 different creatures. Frankly, I don't think any of us would have done that if we could have. But I guess it would add blue to your...
Yeah, there's a deck that I've, wanted to build for a long time.
Oh, Brothers Yamazaki.
Brothers Yamazaki and Sakashima the Imposter.
Yeah. Okay, so that was one of the things, no Sakashima. And so for this episode, each of us is going to go through the deck we built and just briefly talk about its game plan and some of the major cards and major players. Benjamin and I took notes during the games we played, and so if any decks made any particularly strong or impactful plays, we're going to chime in and just talk about what they did during that game. And our first is going to be Randy. Randy designed his deck for me. I was the recipient of Randy's deck.
So you said with yours where you had the idea before the person. I was in the same boat with this one. I have been eyeing Kediss Emberclaw familiar for a while. Quick rundown of Kediss. He's just a little lizard, little 1/1 lizard. He says whenever a commander you control deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to each other opponent. And I love that idea because it's like, oh, I don't have to fight the other big strong person. I can just wail on the person that's lagging behind and still get everyone. Initially, I was going to do a similar creature that has a similar ability, but it's a cat and it's in black. But then I found a better partner to go with it. Skithiryx, aka Skittles, the Blight Dragon.
So Kediss already has partner, which I think the rest of us entirely overlooked. Did any of us use any commanders with partner?
No, I didn't want to limit myself like that because those are weak cards on purpose.
They are weak cards on purpose, but in some ways, I think this was a really smart move because he said, I'm going to make my one commander really, really big and powerful, which is Skithiryx the Blight Dragon. And then that second commander is purely a support card. Its only job is to make Skithiryx that much more of a threat.
Yeah, so Skithiryx is a 4/4 flying infect. Infect is basically... I just have to get 10 infect counters on an opponent. And so because of Kediss, if I hit one person for 4 infect, I hit everyone for 4 infect.
Yeah.
And so it just really ramps up because it's like, oh man, someone may have blockers up. I don't have to attack you. I'm going to attack the person with no flying blockers, with no reach. So it's just a nice, fun way to get around, I guess, tougher opponents. You know,
sure.
And I feel like that's kind of on theme of a Rakdos deck of preying on the weak.
Preying on the weak and getting everybody else in the crossfire.
Yeah. Basically, most of the deck is a bunch of artifacts to make Skithiryx hit harder, even faster. You know, I wanted to beef him up so that I could just one-shot one person and then it kill the whole table. So it's a lot of your traditional artifacts. Loxodon Warhammer for some life gain and trample, and just things that are going to beef them up and give extra evasion just in case there are flying blockers. I found other ways to give them unblockable or a menace or things like that.
Sure. Blackblade Reforged, I think, is a major player here.
Yes.
Because it's going to bump that 4 power on Skithiryx up to over 10 almost every time.
Yeah, pretty much. It's going to turn him into a one-shot. Also things like Hot Soup. It's just a one drop and then you attach it for 3, but it's just like this creature can't be blocked. And then whenever a quick creature is dealt damage, destroy it. Mm-hmm. It has a little bit of a downside there, but I mean, if it can't be blocked once, that's all you need.
Well, Skithiryx does have an ability. You can pay 2 black to regenerate it.
That's true too, So
say the Hot Soup spills on Skithiryx, you can pay 2 black to regenerate if you need to.
Yeah. Most of the other creatures in the deck, there's not many. I think there's 13 other creatures in the entire deck. Spike Shot Goblin. Mm-hmm. So let's say, I'm having an issue with, they've killed Skittles twice. He's really expensive. I'm going to play Spike Shot for 3, equip him up, tap him, and I deal damage to one opponent, and I can at least kill that person. I don't get the Kediss ability of, hitting all 3,
right,
but I can still knock out a single opponent. Maybe there's another creature that's an Eldrazi. No. Let's get this Eldrazi out of here with a little Spike Shot Goblin.
I think your deck has plenty of backup plans. Mm-hmm. Champion of the Flame, Valduk, Keeper of the Flame. Those are both cards that get super powerful based on the number of auras and equipments attached to them.
Yeah, so Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, Krenko, 10 Street Kingpin, and Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs were like my backup defensive strategy. Okay, someone's going wide. This will help me go wide as well and keep people from hitting me on a crackback. basically most of them, let's see, Krenko and Valduk make tokens.
Valduk's tokens only attack, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. They only attack. But
Yeah.
Krenko makes a bunch of tokens based on his power whenever he attacks. So they were just kind of like backup, but also just another good way to get around people. And just really strong for this deck, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to some, like, cards that, like, come out of your hand and then almost instantly win the game. So things like Obosh the Prey Piercer. It says, if a source you control with an odd converted mana cost would deal damage, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player. Dictate of the Twin Gods does the same. It just says, oh, Skithiryx was swinging for 4? No, it's 8.
Yeah.
And if he has even just a single one of these equipments on him, then he's swinging for 10 and the game's almost over.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to point out is that he has Wrathful Red Dragon in here. Red, and 3.
Yeah.
For a flying dragon that says whenever a dragon you control is dealt damage like Skithiryx, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon.
So somebody targets Skithiryx, and Skithiryx says, okay, well, I'm going to deal that much damage, infect,
Back to you.
either to a person or to destroy an indestructible creature or anything.
It's most likely going to be the person.
Yeah.
And then I'll just regenerate Skithiryx, probably.
I think this is a cool card, Last Chance. It's
Yes.
a sorcery for red. Take an extra turn after this one. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. So say you just need one more combat. Last chance, let's go for it. It's a very Rakdos card. I love it.
Yeah, I just thought it was just like a fun, because like I feel like I've been in some situations where like, man, if I just had one more round of combat right now, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I just need one more chance, you know, and I hate that feeling of like, oh, I would have won next round. Nah, I'm going to make that next round now.
Yeah. This is a really cool deck. It swings hard and fast. We played 2 games. This is something we always do every year for Secret Santa. We play 2 games. The first one is the gift game, where the person is looking at the commanders and drawing through the deck and playing it for the first time sight unseen. The second game we play, we give it back to the deck's builder. This is the person who's already seen the deck, they already know how it works, and each person plays the deck they built because they know it really well. And this deck, Kediss and Skithiryx, did win that second game, and it won exactly as intended, with an infect kill from Skithiryx, with Kediss spreading that damage to everybody else.
Well, to be honest, it did win because of me, because I had to choose between Randy winning and Benjamin winning. I can't remember what the deal was. I think it was removing a creature.
Yeah, I guess so.
Depending on who
since
did.
Benjamin had won the first game.
Yeah.
Yeah. We gotta spread the wealth, you know.
Yeah.
You can't let Benjamin win every game.
I mean, we could.
As the recipient of this deck, it was super exciting. I did have an opportunity for a one-hit kill of the entire table, but Derek used a piece of removal. He used Nature's Claim on the boots that gave Skithiryx haste.
Yeah.
With Skithiryx lacking that haste, I wasn't able to get in and secure the one-hit kill on the entire table.
But that was pretty early on in that game, right?
It was very early on. I mean, I remember not hitting a ton of ramp that game. Well, that was the same game that Derek destroyed my soul ring with Broken Bond.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, we were kicking the shit out of this deck both games, but like I would not let this deck get on its own 2 feet, because if it did, I knew.
And rightfully so. It only takes a turn.
Yeah.
It's the heroine of Magic, not even once.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was just super scary just having it out there, right?
Just seeing it in the command zone.
Yeah, and that's probably the only flaw in this deck is how much attention it draws immediately.
How telegraphed it is.
Yeah, you just go, okay, all my removal is going after every artifact you have, every piece of ramp, and I know I have to save my Swords to Plowshares for Skithiryx, or whatever.
Because we know that Skithiryx has Regenerate.
Yep.
And haste.
Yeah.
I know, I could have done it without those boots if I'd had 1 extra black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an awesome deck, Randy. I loved it.
I'm terrified to see what you do to upgrade it.
Yeah, I have made some upgrades already, I think. So the upgrades that I'm working on are in the instant category, using more combat tricks to do a bigger win with a smaller mana investment. Or a bigger power boost, even if it's only once, for a smaller mana investment. So the way the deck was built originally, there's lots of equipments, which I don't think is wrong, but the only equipments that I have in my my new version are like protection and keywords.
Yeah,
I'm not
that makes
really
sense.
worried about power boosts because I'm going to have
An instant beef you up real fast.
You know, for example, you do have Antagonize in here, which gives a creature +4/+3. Yeah, that's great. You know, if I can have a couple more cards like that, then I might be able to just storm out, play 2 or 3 of those boosts, and a lot of the ones that I've added in will also give it trample at the same time. So that's another reason I don't need an equipment for that.
That's another one, like Antagonize and Dreadmaw's Ire, were two that I really like, because not only do you get the +2/+2 from Dreadmaws, you also get trample, and when you do deal that combat damage to a player, let's also take one of their artifacts as well. It's like, I got hit, I got infected, I got hit harder than I expected, and then I lost my Soul Ring. It's just really demoralizing.
It is a huge, huge hit. So
one red.
I'm excited to make this deck that much faster, and strangely, I don't think the deck is going to go that much over budget.
Yeah.
Those of you listening, whenever we do our Secret Santa decks, once we've received it, it's ours. We can change it, we can adjust it, we can pump it over budget.
Reformat.
Yeah, we can reformat it if we want. I am adding a lot more card draw in it as well. Like black card draw, things like Sign in Blood.
Things that probably cost money.
Yeah, they're a little more. They're like $2 or $3 cards.
Yeah, exactly.
But with a $50 budget, those cards start adding up pretty quick. When even Command Tower is $1.85. All right, so that's the first deck. Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon, and Kediss, Emberclaw Familiar. Really fast, out of the gate, winner of the second game, and a cool game plan using Infect in order to win. The second deck we're going to talk about is the deck that I built. I built this deck for Derek. But like I said, Derek was not in my head when I was building this deck, although I think he was the perfect recipient for it.
Could not have been a better choice for me.
Yeah, it could not have gone better. This deck is right up his alley. So my two commanders were Ilharg the Raze-Boar, who's red, and then Radagast the Brown from the Adventures in Middle-earth set, and he's green. So this is a Gruul, stompy, big attack deck with all of the great card draw of green. The engine of the deck is Ilharg. He is a 6/6 with trample for 3 red. And his ability says whenever he attacks, you can take another creature from your hand, put it onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and at the end of your turn, you return that card to your hand again. So the creature comes down from your hand, it attacks for that turn, and at the end of the turn, you return it to your hand again. Ilharg does have another ability that's pure bonus. Whenever Ilharg dies or is put into exile, you can instead put him in your library third from the top. So rather than sending him back to the command zone, you can put him back in your deck to draw again later. That is the engine of the deck. This deck wants to play big creatures for free. It wants to put them down, get some kind of enter the battlefield value from it, and then return it to the hand to do something else with it later. Radagast the Brown is the long-term value. He's going to provide card draw to this deck, where I can constantly see more and more of my deck. So Radagast costs 4, 2 green. It says whenever he or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you look at the top X cards of your library, where X is that creature's mana value. You can reveal a creature card that doesn't share a creature type with any creatures you control. So you can reveal a creature card and then you can put that card into your hand, and you put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. That sounds confusing, but basically the more expensive the card, the more cards you get to look at from the top of your deck, and then you get to pick one and put it into your hand. He has some text that says the creature has to be a different creature type than anything else you control. That was not hard to build. I kind of just kept that in mind as I was building the deck. I do think there was maybe 2 beasts and maybe 2 shamans, if I remember correctly, but just about everything was a different creature type than anything else. So this deck works by casting Radagast, getting a card draw from it, casting Ilharg, getting a card draw from him because of Radagast being on the field, and then swinging with Ilharg and just slamming whatever creature I happen to have onto the battlefield for whatever value it's going to provide. I had 12 different cards that give me some form of card draw. Things like Clockwork Fox or Skyscanner. These are cheap, small creatures that I can play in the early game even if I don't have Radagast or Ilharg out, and I'm still going to feel good about drawing cards from them. Or I can play cards like Keeper of Fables, which just say when one or more non-human creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So no matter if I'm getting in with 2 creatures, then I'm going to get to draw 2 cards. And each time Ilharg's ability goes off whenever he attacks, I can take a creature from my hand, put it on the battlefield, Radagast sees it, and lets me draw a card. It's basically having Guardian Project in the command zone. This deck, while not winning either of the games, was pretty much the boogeyman of the first game. The entire first game, it was putting on huge pressure. Derek, what did it feel like playing Ilharg and Radagast?
Trez, slides me in the box, whatever. I open it up. I see it. My eyes kind of roll back in the back of my head. I start seeing the lines of the matrix in the code. I knew how to do this, and it was like coming home. It was like the prodigal son showing back up. I know red-green very well.
Yeah.
Half my decks are some kind of red-green, so I feel like I kind of know this play style like the back of my hand. It felt great. I didn't get a great opening hand, so I was really worried about that, but I lucked into a clutch Soul Ring on like turn 4, I think, which let me cast Ilharg a turn early.
You played your Soul Ring the turn after casting Broken Bond on mine.
Yeah. Because
this is a 29-cent card for green and 1. You destroy target artifact or enchantment, and you can put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield.
I think it's great.
I have always used it to destroy someone else's early game ramp and to ramp myself at the same time. It's a common in a bunch of sets for 29 cents. Pick it up if you don't have it.
Yeah. So I did that because, like I said, I was worried about Skithiryx because you had played Soul Ring, and I think Skithiryx would have been coming out and swinging for lethal like the next turn if I didn't.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and did that, which is something I feel like I don't usually do. I usually don't play super aggressive in the early game because I'm usually busy ramping.
Right.
But this card is, like you said, it's target removal and it's ramp for me. And this whole deck, I feel like I was just foot on the gas as fast as possible without letting up. Like every turn, I was beating the life out of Skithiryx. I was keeping Randy's board in check. And I was admittedly a little scared to go against Benjamin's deck at the time because of, we can get to that next. But yeah, I just felt like a monster, just nonstop chaos, just smashing everyone every turn. It felt great. It felt powerful.
Some all-stars from this deck. Tornado Elemental, which mattered because of 2 of the other commanders. It mattered because of Skithiryx, which we've already talked about, but one of the commanders of Randy's deck was flying, and then the deck that Benjamin had that you made, Derek, had lots of flying drakes. Tornado Elemental, whenever it enters the battlefield, it deals 6 damage to each creature with flying. And then, whenever it attacks, it can assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So, if you drop him with Ilharg, you can wipe all the flyers off the board, and then it can deal its 6 damage for its 6 power, no matter what, as if it weren't blocked at all.
Yeah.
Whiptongue Hydra is the same. It also destroys all creatures with flying whenever it enters the battlefield.
I did get in your head a little bit about that.
You did. You totally did.
I milled it to the bottom so I knew it was in the deck, and then I was just pretending like I may have it, and Travis was like, oh god, I can't play Skithiryx because he's just going to destroy it.
I was like, yeah, if I play Skithiryx, I won't have the 2 black I need to regenerate it, and he'll just play Whiptongue Hydra and kill it. It won't matter.
From my point of view, the best card in the deck was Siege Behemoth. That card was working overtime with the whole deck because he would cheat him out with Ilharg. 7-drop. That triggers Radagast. I get to look at the 7 cards and get a card that looks good. He's a 7/4, and he says as long as he's attacking, which Ilharg makes him attack.
That's right.
For each creature you control, you may have that creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So I'm hitting for 13 damage a turn.
13 if it's just Ilharg and Siege Behemoth.
Yeah. And I would just keep plowing through Randy's little minions. He had like little small guys with Ilharg because he's got trample, and then I had Travis's board picked clean, so it's just a Siege Behemoth every turn to his face too.
Yeah. Were there any other cards that you were glad to see?
So it's not a great card, but it came in at the right time, and it's a card I would never have paid attention to. Plundering Barbarian, red and 2. When he enters the battlefield, I can destroy an artifact, target artifact, or I can create a treasure token, which I think I made a treasure token the first time and then used the destroy target artifact on Blackblade Reforged on Skithiryx.
I think so. Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, it was just foot on the gas the whole time, being able to just control the whole table with removal and damage. It felt great.
This is going to matter when Benjamin's describing his deck, but you used Plundering Barbarian to destroy Phyrexian Soul Gorger.
Oh, yeah, that's
who
right.
was probably one of the all-stars from the deck that Benjamin made, I think.
Yes.
We'll definitely get to that. Some other cards that I think are great in this deck.
Oh, Bower Passage.
Yes, Bower Passage. This is a 46-cent card. Creatures with flying can't block creatures you control. I love it for playing with flying creatures. There is a dragon or two in this deck, but there's also a demon, Bloodthirster, which has flying, and so, sorry, Bower Passage says you can't block. And it really sucked because Skithiryx as my one big blocker and having Infect makes him a great blocker, but Bower Passage just made it useless. Some other cards I think are good. I do have a Rogue's Passage in here. Just another thing to keep Ilharg alive so that it can attack. Same with Whisper Silk Cloak. You know, just some things to say, Ilharg can swing with impunity. We want him to be able to attack every time and not worry about dying from other blockers. Anybody else have any comments for Ilharg and Radagast?
No, it was great. I loved how it just all came together. Yeah, when Derek was playing it, I was quite impressed.
Fear the Boar God in you.
Cool. The next one is the deck that Derek built for Benjamin. Take it away.
Okay, so for a long time, I would flip through different monocolored commanders trying to figure out what sounds good or whatever. And I remember flipping through it and reading Jolrael, Mwonvuli, Recluse. I don't want to butcher it, but I think that's how you say it.
Yeah.
She costs green 1. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 green cat creature token. She's a 1/2. And then you can pay green, and 4 till end of turn. Creatures you control have base power and toughness XX, where X is the number of cards in your hand. And I remember reading that. I was like, wait a second, I feel like I just read that earlier. Why is that? Why am I reading it again in a different section? So I went back and I realized that Talrand does a very similar thing. Talrand Sky Summoner, blue, and 2. For a legendary Merfolk Wizard, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. I was like, oh, that's cool. They kind of want to do similar things. So I decided to combine them up, and the thought is that, I mean, your commanders are super cheap, and you just play cantrips, cards that draw a card or draw more than one card, and that would give you cats, it would give you drakes. It just seemed like a very easy deck to exploit by just doing normal basic things.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So the idea, like I said, is to just draw cards, and I put a lot of counter spells in it. I put some ramp spells in it, so that way you're always getting drakes and cats. I tried to make it where you can draw cards on other people's turns. I put the counter spells in there so I can get drakes with instants. So, I mean, it's honestly a pretty simple deck. It's just card draw and control, and it's a deck that doesn't seem threatening, and it never really is threatening to the point of like a Skithiryx or the Ilharg Radagast combo, but it just generates so much value throughout the game because no one would mess with it because he had counter spells, he had blockers, he had all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, just amazingly cheap spells. Opt, Winged Words, Scour All Possibilities, Deliberate, Divination, Radical Idea. All of these cards cost 1 or 2, and they just completely turn your entire deck on. You pay 1 blue for Opt, and you've gotten both a cat and a Drake. Mm-hmm. You paid 1 blue, you got to scry, draw, and get 2 2/2 creatures. You put 4 power on the board for 1 blue mana, in addition to drawing a card. Like, that's just really, really good. And then, Jolrael's second ability, it's a win condition directly on the card. You can pay 4 green, and because all of your instants have been drawing you cards, you're gonna have a full grip, or maybe even more. And now, all of those drakes and cats you have, they're not 2/2s anymore. They're 7/7s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is just an awesome combination of cards. And of course, your entire removal suite, even just 1 blue, unsummon, return a creature to its owner's hand. Like, this is a 5-cent card that I think you used on Skithiryx twice?
Yeah, I used it once, and then I used something that let me get something out of the graveyard. What was that?
Was it Flood of Recollection?
I think it was, yeah.
It might have been. I think you have 1 or 2 other cards that do
Yeah,
the same
it
thing.
was Flood of Recollection.
Yeah, a 4-cent card that says you can get an instant or sorcery from your graveyard back to your hand.
This whole deck is so cheap. But of course, it can be upgraded so heavily. Like, you take out the garbage counterspells that let people pay extra mana, and you put in mana.
You take out cancel and you stick in mana drain.
Yeah, I don't even think
Right.
counterspell is in this deck.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can add that. I've been thinking about how to upgrade it because I have one. It's not the same deck. It's similar in the sense that it's blue-green, draw lots of cards. I have Uro, but that one plays a ton of creatures, and it's all ramp and creatures, and just wants to have a full grip all the time. It doesn't play very many counterspells. It doesn't play much instants and sorceries. And so this is kind of like a different take on it. I've been trying to think, like, I wanted to go even more in on always having answers, having counterspells, playing on other people's turns, and doing stuff like that. So yeah, that's a big one there, is just trying to figure out going even further, taking out, like you said, the mana leaks and the lofty denial, things like that, and putting in harder counterspells. Probably more counterspells.
Yeah. Things I wanted to put in but couldn't due to budget is like Seedborn Muse to let you untap all your permanents on each person's turn so you can always be interacting.
Yeah. And swinging.
Yeah, and swinging, yeah. Wilderness Reclamation. It does a similar thing, except it's all your lands only.
Mm-hmm.
Crew Fix would be nice to store mana.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Oh, like Cryptolith Rite and those other kinds of enchantments that let your creatures tap for mana.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Oh, no. I'm seeing some cards that we didn't see in the gameplay that are just so cool. This card is called Chilling Trap. It's a 7-cent card for 1 blue. It's an instant. It says target creature gets -4/-0 until end of turn. If you control a wizard, draw a card. Well, Talrand Sky Summoner is a wizard, so already this is 1 blue, draw a card. That's great. But target creature gets -4/-0. Oh, Skithiryx is attacking me? Would be a shame if it had 0 power.
Right.
Yeah, and he was killed by a Drake.
Yeah. Or, oh man, that's a really big Ilharg. It deals 2.
Yeah.
Right.
-4/-0 doesn't seem like much, but then you get to draw a card on top of it. That's great. We were talking before the show. Fumble. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Gain control of all auras and equipment that were attached to it. Then attach them to another creature. This is a 36-cent card. It's 1 and a blue. And I just thought how Skithiryx would be the most perfect target for it because he's holding all these equipment. So you can return Skithiryx to hand, which makes his regenerate ability mean nothing. And then you get to take his Blackblade Reforged or the Loxodon Warhammer that he was holding and stick it on one of your flying drakes instead.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really glad you put Fumble in there because it's one of those cards that's in the pile for every blue deck I build and is always like the 103rd card. So
yes,
this one will be one that I leave it in.
So my thinking with that, these are budget decks, and my thought was that someone or more will build a Voltron deck because it's the easiest way to do something.
Yeah.
Or the cheapest way I feel like to do something. And, I'm going to get them. They're gonna swing out thinking they're gonna get me. I'm going to double, triple, whatever block with drakes and cats, and then steal their stuff and kill their commander.
Yeah, it was amazing. We would be remiss to not point out a 1-cent card. This card is 1 penny, and it's called Lull. Lull for 1 and a green, and it says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Benjamin successfully lulled a Skithiryx attack that would have killed the entire table.
Yep. Yeah.
A 1-cent card, and it got him a Drake on top of it.
Yeah, and it also has cycling, which I put as like backup.
It does also have cycling, so you can use cycling to get a cat from it, from Jolrael if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a really cool deck. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Benjamin, how did you win the first game? Was it Thunderfoot Baloth?
Yeah, so Thunderfoot Baloth, as long as you control your commander, which of course this one has 2, it's really easy to do, it and other creatures you control get +2/+2 and have trample. I also had out from pretty early on Gaia's Anthem, which gives all creatures you control +1/+1. So instead of making 2/2 tokens, I was making 5/5 tokens.
You had favorable winds out too, right?
Did have favorable winds out, yeah, which gives all creatures with flying +1/+1, which means my drakes were actually 6/6s at the end of the game. So basically every time I played a card, I was getting a 5/5 cat and a 6/6 drake with trample. And so it didn't take long for me to close out the game that way.
Yeah, there is a instant card. It's called Poison the Blade.
Oh yeah, I did play that card.
Yeah, it's green and 1. It's an instant. Target creature gains death touch until end turn. Draw a card. It's doing what you want. And also, if you give death touch to one of your dumb little cats or drakes, they die, who cares, but you get something you kill their creature. It's just so much value for 2 mana in this deck.
Or like Ilharg is attacking Randy. Randy puts a blocker in front of it. You cast Poison the Blade.
I think that's what I did.
Give Randy's blocker Death Touch. You draw a card. Ilharg dies. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
Except for Ilharg.
Yeah.
Benjamin, you said that is what you did?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I
think I might have been up getting a Dr. Pepper at that point.
I'm pretty sure I used Poison the Blade on somebody blocking Ilharg. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason that deck wasn't the winner. That Ilharg and Radagast was the winner. Because he was going off. He was like keeping everybody's board in check, but it required that he keep swinging to get Ilharg's triggers or Bloodthirster's triggers. And I'm pretty sure it stopped because he swung Ilharg at somebody and I poisoned the blade on their little chump blocker, which meant that he now had to recast Ilharg and wait a turn.
Yeah.
Right.
What really did me in, I think because I had to recast Ilharg, I didn't have enough mana to cast Bloodthirster and Siege Behemoth.
Yeah.
Hard cast them.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't win the game that way.
Yeah. It bought me just enough time to build up the army so that I could play Thunderfoot Baloth and close out the game. I think I knocked out Derek and Travis on the first swing with Thunderfoot Baloth, and then had enough blockers for Randy so that I could do it again the next turn.
At no point were you ever like the greatest threat either.
No.
Like it was just like a consistent like second, third place type of like feeling like, oh, I don't need to look at him because he's not threatening right now.
Yeah, it never felt like he was on the beatdown.
Yeah.
He was always just like, oh no, there's nothing to see over here. Don't mind me. Just some cats. Nothing to worry about.
Everything's fine.
Few cats, few drakes. I have blockers, so you might as well swing somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
If you point things at me, your thing's going to get unsummoned, but if you don't, I'm not messing with you. Just let me do my thing. Sometimes I'll draw an extra card. That's all.
Benjamin, any other highlights? Any other features from this deck that you want to point out?
I like having a full grip of cards with answers. It did that really well. I love all the cards that drew extra cards. That's something it does have in common with my Uro deck, is just everything draws an extra card in addition to whatever it's doing. It feels good. It feels good to be like, okay, I never actually did this, but I would have. Into the Royal, draw an extra card, save myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember you getting a couple extra card draws from Wavebreak Hippocamp, the horsefish.
Did I?
Yeah, the first game. It says whenever you cast your
yeah.
first spell during each opponent's turn, draw a card.
Yeah, that one and Bite into Thassa, because when you've got all those tokens, yeah, my grip was full the whole time. I was like, why can't I hold all these cards? But it was...
Wavebreak Hippocamp is going to help Jolrael's cat trigger go off.
Right, because... Yeah.
Jolrael says whenever you draw your second card each turn. Well, if you deliberate during somebody else's turn, you're only drawing one. But if you have Wavebreak Hippocamp and you draw two, Jolrael gets you a cat.
Right. Yeah, that was definitely helping a lot.
So you're getting cats during everybody's turns. You're getting drakes during everybody's turns. This deck was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And this deck did win the first match, right?
Yes, it did.
It was awesome. All right. This is the last one. The deck that Benjamin built for Randy. Go ahead.
Okay, so this deck, it was actually inspired by Randy, but it was not originally going to be built for Randy because we didn't know who was getting what decks at first. We didn't decide until we were getting ready to podcast one night, and I said, look, this deck was made with Randy in mind, and we all were like, you just want to give it to him? I was like, yes. Early on in Randy's Magic career, he had a deck.
Glissa.
Yeah, Glissa.
Which Glissa is it? Glissa the Traitor?
Glissa the Traitor.
Yes.
It's a green-black one that says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. So the idea is supposed to be you're putting artifacts in your graveyard, you kill something that your opponent controls, you get that artifact back, you keep replaying it. And he tried to do it with creatures that they were called Arcbound creatures. They have an ability called Modular, where they come into play with +1/+1 counters, and when they die, you get to move those +1/+1 counters to another artifact creature. So if they're constantly dying, those +1/+1 counters are building up, then you get to replay them, and you're supposed to be building up your board while you do this. Well, that deck didn't work really well for Randy. I think part of the reason is because, killing your opponent's creatures and having artifacts in the graveyard all the time and Modular don't really work together. And a lot of the modular cards aren't super strong. Yeah.
I also
But-
don't think green-black's a great artifact color.
No, it's really not. So there was just a lot of things working against him. It was a really ambitious project for him to take on.
It was my first deck that I ever.
Yes.
Yeah, it was literally
I
his
felt-
very first deck that he decided, I'm going to build this one from scratch from the ground up by myself.
Yeah, that's always stuck with me because I like that idea. It's very similar to like a Teshiro Umezawa. No, not Teshiro. The other Umezawa, the one that whenever you kill an opponent's creature, you can return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand.
That is Teshiro.
Oh, it is Teshiro. Okay.
Yeah, he's mono black.
Yes. Both of those have that same idea of you kill your opponent's creatures, you get something back from your graveyard. The idea of recycling your modular creatures has stuck with me since we first started playing, back in 2017, 2018, when I joined the group. And even though it didn't work, it's always kind of stuck in the back of my head. And so this, I thought, was the opportunity to play with commanders that could make it work. And the big one was Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle. That's a 4-mana white bird cleric, 2/2 with flying that says whenever you cast a historic spell, you return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. There's 3 things that count as historic. One is artifacts, one is legendaries, and then one is sagas. And that's a type of enchantment not really relevant here because there are no sagas in this deck. But every time you cast an artifact spell, you can return a cheap creature to the battlefield. If you made them all artifact creatures, it meant that every single creature in your deck would also get you a creature back from your graveyard. And I realized, hey, this would be great for kind of fulfilling the deck that Randy started making, because he could just loop every single modular creature with itself. Like each one, if you can get one in the graveyard, and you can make these massive modular creatures. And since he tried it, they've actually printed a lot of white modular creatures, which would not have gone in his deck originally. And so now there's more modular creatures to work with. They've also printed a lot of creatures that don't technically have modular, but they do the same thing.
Looks like this was Modern Horizons 2. They made a lot of white modular creatures.
Yeah, they made like Arcbound Mouser, Arcbound Javelier. They also made Mere Scrappling, which you sacrifice it to put a +1/+1 counter on something. Mere Apprentice came out in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty that says it comes in with a +1/+1 counter, and when it dies, if it had any counters, put those on target creature. So there's a lot of pseudo-modular out there as well. So a lot of new cards have really grown the number of modulars. Sir Ginger is similar. It gets bigger whenever an artifact is put into the graveyard from play. And so my thought here was, okay, I can make a critical mass of cheap artifact creatures that play around with +1/+1 counters. And then every time I cast a new one, I get back the old one, and my army is constantly growing. And so I knew I wanted to build something with Teshar. So I actually just went through and was like, okay, I just want to find another monocolored creature that works with Teshar. I spun the wheel on Scryfall and went through a bunch of options and finally found Imotekh, which is from the Warhammer 40k commander deck that says whenever artifact leaves your graveyard, and that could be going anywhere. It could be exile, could be to your hand, could be back to the battlefield. Then you create 2 Necron Warrior artifact creature tokens. So it creates 4 power, 2 artifact creatures every time something leaves your graveyard. Well, Teshar's already doing that. What that means is every time you cast any historic spell, anything that's legendary or artifact, you're going to get something back from your graveyard. So that means, let's say I play a Soul Ring. I'm going to get back a creature from my graveyard, and that thing returning from the graveyard will also get me 2 warrior tokens. And so basically casting a 1-mana artifact will get me probably 5 or 6 power onto the battlefield.
Insane.
Yeah.
Absolute insanity.
And so the only thing left to do was find ways to put things in the graveyard so that it could happen. So I had a lot of things that self-sacrifice to draw cards, a lot of things that sacrifice other things. You almost don't care. And that's ultimately what it came down to, is I was looking for anything that would help me put things in the graveyard. And you don't care what they are. Anything that'll sacrifice something that fits the criteria, it's in. Anything that'll sacrifice itself for cheap or free, it's in. Right? And the idea is you just want things in the graveyard so that you can get them back out again, and you don't care what they do because you're going to win with Imotech's tokens. I eventually narrowed it down into a deck that actually works pretty well. When we do these challenge decks, because we're on a budget, I usually go all in on a theme, sometimes at the expense of consistency. Or actually, it's for the sake of consistency at the expense of better cards, is what I should say. So I originally said I want every single card in the deck to be an artifact creature that costs 3 or less. so that there was literally nothing that didn't trigger Teshar. My original draft of this deck was actually like that. And then I eventually said, you know what? I gotta have a Soul Ring. And then I said, well, okay, I should probably have a Skull Clamp. And I went through, I think there are 5 cards that are not both artifacts and creatures. Everything does cost 3 or less, which gave me another thing to make it like Randy. Because everything costs 3 or less, and so many of the cheap artifact creatures are mana creatures, things like the Gold Mirror and Lead Mirror, Hedron Crawler, Ornithopter of Paradise, Mannequin. There's so many cheap artifact creatures that make mana, in addition to everything being cheap and having almost no color requirement because it's almost all artifacts. I basically said, look, I can run with like 28 lands because you never need more than 4 mana to operate the deck. I was like, you know what? This is great for Randy too. He hates lands.
It's not that I don't hate land.
It's perfect.
It's the least fun part of your deck, right?
Yeah, the only deck that I have that has under 30 lands is Brago at 29.
Well, now you have one that has 28.
Yeah.
And I even went a step further and made the lands part of the deck because one of the things the deck was missing when I kept playtesting it was a critical mass of sack outlets. I eventually caved and put in Viscera Seer and Yahini Undying Partisan, which are both free sack outlets, just because there were not enough ways to keep the cycle going. But the lands played a big part of it. There's a bunch of lands that sack things. There's Phyrexia's Core that can sack an artifact to gain a life. There's Hostile that can sacrifice a creature to eventually flip around. There's High Marker that can sacrifice a creature to gain a life. I guess that's it. But the idea is that you're always looking for ways to get more creatures in the graveyard, and every single opportunity to do that was taken into account there. Lesser Massacre is actually really cool because as an additional cost to cast it, you have to discard a card. So you discard the card, you put it on the stack, casting it will trigger Teshar, and you'll get the discarded card back if you have nothing else.
That is just wild.
Reminds me of my Exodus.
If you have nothing better to get, you can just get the card you discard.
Yeah, so you can actually use that as a way to cheat mana. Because Lesser Massacre costs 2, you can discard like a Workshop Assistant or Salvager of Ruin or something that costs 3 and get it. Same thing with Armix Filigree Thrasher. It lets you discard a card to give a creature -X/-X, where X is the number of artifacts you have. Great. You just toss an artifact that powers up that ability, and then you get that back later by casting something else. So now I'll come back to what you were saying was one of the all-stars of the deck, which is Phyrexian Soulgorger. Phyrexian Soulgorger is an 8/8 for 3 mana, which is an incredible rate.
No card should have that much power for that cost.
Yes, but it comes with a huge drawback. Cumulative upkeep of sacrifice a creature. And cumulative upkeep means every turn that it's on the battlefield, you pay it that many times. So the first upkeep you have after you play it, you sacrifice 1 creature. But the next time it comes up, you have to sacrifice 2, then 3, then 4, then so on. And if you don't do that, you have to sacrifice Phyrexian Soulgorger. Well, it's in there as a sack outlet, as a way for you to just be like, I have nothing in the graveyard. I'm going to get rid of 2 or 3 things, and then I will get them back again by playing more cards. The thing is, if you don't have an engine going where you can get stuff back again, you just sacrifice it. You say, well, not paying the cost, it goes to the graveyard, and then when you cast something, you get it back. It makes it an excellent blocker, even if you're never able to swing in with it, because you can just play it, never pay its trigger, and just always get it back when you play the next thing.
Yeah, and now it's just an 8/8 wall.
Yeah.
That can protect you from Ilharg.
Yep, it did that.
As much as you want.
Yeah, it was doing that for a long time, stalling Ilharg until you got the thing that lets you do stuff unblocked. Yeah, so this deck, basically, I was able to narrow stuff down into things that make additional tokens, things that draw cards. It never came up, but one of the all-stars of the deck, once you have Teshar in play, is Scarecrow, which lets you play 1 and sacrifice a Scarecrow, which is usually going to be itself, because there's not really other Scarecrows in the deck, to draw a card. And so what you can do is you pay 1, you sack it, you draw a card, you play the card you play, you get it back. So basically, it gives every single card in your deck, you can pay an additional 1 to draw a card.
Yeah, because it's coming back onto the battlefield for free.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you have a sack outlet, then Filigree Familiar and Circuit Mender do that same thing, where you can always sack them to draw a card, and then you play the thing that you drew and get it back. And sack it to draw a card, play the thing you drew, get it back. There's several things like that where they didn't come up in either game, but they're great ways to just keep your hand and keep the cards coming so that you can just keep doing that. So because I went all in on we're just going to trigger Teshar and Imotekh as many times as possible. That's the only goal of the deck. There are a lot of interesting ways to go with this that I did not explore. But because it was Randy's birthday, just like a week before we did this, I decided to give him basically a whole bunch of cards that he could use instead if he wants to explore this in different ways. Cards like Selfless Spirit, which is a 2-mana, 2/1 flying that says if you sacrifice it, all creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Well, you can sacrifice it, then play something to get it back. No one can ever deal with your board.
Oh my gosh, it's wild. And even that's only a $1 card.
Yeah. No, it could have definitely gone in here. It would have diluted the number of artifacts, right?
Sure.
It probably just doesn't need this many because I have like a small recursion package that returns artifacts to your hand. Things like Scrap Trawler or Mirror Retriever, Workshop Assistant. And I feel like you can use those to keep artifacts in your hand so that you could be getting back the non-artifacts. I just didn't want to do that. Ashnod's Altar should certainly be in here.
Mm-hmm.
Both a free sack outlet and gives you mana to play the cards you draw off your sack outlets. One I think that would really play well into the modular theme, right? Your army is growing as all your modulars are being cycled in and out of the game, is Anafenza Kintry Spirit, which would trigger Teshar. It is legendary. It says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, bolster 1, which means you just put a +1/+1 counter on the weakest creature you have. And so basically, as you're cycling all this stuff, you're also getting all those counters that will be passed around on the modular creatures that are dying and coming back into play. One that I did not give him, but he should certainly put in here is the Ozolith, which says whenever a creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, you put those counters on the Ozolith and then you can move them onto another creature. That's a way to just make it where your modular creatures are just never... You can't get rid of the counters. Every turn, there's more counters than there were the turn before, and they can't stop. But the Ozolith is a $30 card and would have blown the budget, so
right.
He didn't get that.
Benjamin, what do you think of Throne of Geth? Tap, sacrifice an artifact, proliferate.
I think it'd be great. I think it would.
Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, I have most of these cards. I can just build this deck.
Oh, yeah. No, this deck's really easy to build. I think there's only one expensive card. It's Arcbound Ravager. It's like a $12 card.
Yeah, $12.
It does everything you want. And in fact, that is one way to get through damage. Like, let's say you have like 10 little Necron warriors and your opponent has 8 blockers. And you're like, man, I just need to get through for 10 damage, but I can't. You just swing with all of them, then you sack every single one that's blocked, which builds up counters on the Arcbound Ravager, and then you sacrifice the Arcbound Ravager, and because it has...
sacrifice him to himself.
Yep, which will move all the counters that just got placed on him to one of the unblocked tokens, and then get in that damage. Any free sack outlets in this deck allows for untold shenanigans, but Arcbound Ravager is the best one by far, which is why he's a $12 card.
I mean, the Secret Lair art that you have for it, or whatever this art is, sick.
It's the cheapest one.
This promo art... Yeah, it looks awesome.
That's the one that's in the deck. It's the cheapest version of the card,
like Godzilla
surprisingly.
Glowing from the inside, covered in armor or something.
Which is funny, because he's just a 1/1 when he comes into play.
Yeah, it has no reason being as cool as it does.
Yeah.
Randy, what cards did you feel were all-stars?
Man, I'm trying to remember.
This was a hard deck to follow what was going on from across the table.
It was hard to pilot for the first time, like not really knowing. I guess I kind of knew what I was supposed to do, but it was also like, it was tough for me to, I guess, the first time. I'm excited to play it more though. I was looking through the cards earlier and there was 2 that I'm like wanting to get to play more. It's a common card, but it looks really like gross, but also fun. That I want to get to use is Mandible Justicar. It's a 2/1 with a lifelink, and when another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it gets a +1/+1. It just has like these big pincher.
It looks so gross.
Hands.
This art is an all-time favorite from the All Will Be One Phyrexia set for me.
Yeah, that body horror is just top tier.
Each of its arms has 2 hands at the end.
Oh, you can see their hands. Yeah.
Yes, the arms separate at the elbows into 2 more mouths.
Yeah.
Go to the video version if you're not on it so you can see that artwork. It is sickening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just looking at that, a little earlier when you were talking. I was like, ooh. Ooh.
Yeah.
It came up in the second game, I think. There's a card here. It's 12 cents. It's called Foundry Inspector.
Oh, yeah.
For 3 mana. It's a 3/2. It says artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. I have started putting this in my decks if I have 20 artifacts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any Voltron deck or any artifact-based thing, I'll just throw Foundry Inspector in here because it's going to save you tons and tons of mana every time.
Yeah.
And I think in the second game, Benjamin, when you played with it, you were casting spells for free.
Yes. Yeah.
There's lots of 1-drops in here, and if their price has been reduced by 1, you can just throw it onto the battlefield, get Teshar's trigger, and get a creature with mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield for paying nothing.
Yeah. In fact, there was a chance for me to go infinite in that last game at instant speed because of Foundry Inspector. There's all sorts of ways to do it. If you have either Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter, which lets you cast artifacts as though they had flash, and then Shimmermere lets you do the same thing. So those two. And then if you have any of the 1-mana ones, in this case I think I had Signal Pest, and then a Sack Outlet, I had Arcbound Ravager. Well, okay, you don't need one of the flash ones. That just lets you do it at instant speed. You need either a Sack Outlet plus Mirror Retriever or Workshop Assistant, or you need Salvager of Ruin, which lets you sacrifice it to get something out of your graveyard. So any of those which you sacrifice, they go to the graveyard, you get something back to your hand, and then a 1-mana thing that's cost is reduced by Foundry Inspector. What you do is you sacrifice the thing that lets you get an artifact from your graveyard to your hand.
Okay, so let's just say we're working with Workshop Assistant.
Okay, Workshop Assistant says when it dies, return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. Okay,
got it.
And you have a Sack Outlet, Arcbound Ravager. Okay, so you sacrifice the 1-mana thing. It doesn't matter what it is, but let's say Iron Apprentice. You sacrifice Iron Apprentice. Then you sacrifice the Workshop Assistant to get the Iron Apprentice back to your hand. And then you play the Iron Apprentice for free because its cost is being reduced. So it goes from 1 to 0, which will return the Workshop Assistant back to the battlefield with Teshar.
As long as you've got Teshar.
Yeah, so you need Teshar too.
Yeah.
So obviously this was not built as a combo deck, but it's real easy to just accidentally luck into a combo.
Sure, yeah.
Because now that gives you infinite sack triggers, infinite returning from graveyard triggers, which also will trigger Imotekh.
Yeah, with Imotekh, that'll make your army.
Yeah, that'll give you an infinite army. I mentioned Iron Apprentice. That's infinite +1/+1 counters.
Same with Sparring Construct.
Same with Sparring Construct. Same with Mere Scrappling, right? Which is its own sack outlet there. And of course, infinite +1/+1 counters with Arcbound Ravager, which is what you're using there to sack things. Infinite Scry if you have Viscera Seer. And then infinite loops with Arcbound Worker will also get you infinite +1/+1 counters. So if you have Imotekh out, which is making your army infinitely big, and then one of those other ones that's making you infinite +1/+1 counters, that means you're going both tall and wide.
Right.
Makes it real easy. Yeah.
Wow.
It's easy to gain a lot of life if you get any of the life gain cards. And I know Randy likes to do that.
Yeah, Circuit Mender, Filigree Familiar, both of those have you gain 2 life when it enters, I think.
Yep. Early in the game, before you've assembled a lot of pieces, you just gotta use what you have, whatever you've drawn, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that you can just sack to itself is Bottle Gnomes, which you sacrifice to gain 3 life. And so early on, let's say you play Bottle Gnomes turn 3, and then you play Teshar turn 4. Then every turn after that, you just keep playing out your hands, you just sacrifice Bottle Gnomes first. And then you'll get it back. And it means that every single card you play comes with a gain 3 life on top of it. There's lots of little things like that where it's like, I don't know what I'm going to play before Teshar, but if it's a Mere Scrappling, then I'm going to be putting +1/+1 counters on things as I build my board. If it's Bottle Gnomes, I'm going to be gaining life as I build my board. If it's Ariok Replica, I'm going to be preventing all damage to me as I build my board.
Right.
Just things like that. If it's Filigree Familiar or Circuit Mender, then I'm both gaining life and drawing cards as I build my board. It's just one of those things where it's just, eventually you get so much value that you draw into the things that help you start to push through damage and do more per turn.
Once again, I mean, it's classic Benjamin style to build a deck with a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah.
But just what you've created with $50 is awesome. I'm super impressed.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Randy.
What?
You just didn't sound as excited. You're like,
Oh, no. I am. I'm excited to get the hang of it.
Yeah.
Randy, you want to trade Archelos for Imotekh and Teshar?
No. I mean, I'll play Archelos, and you can play Imotekh and Teshar, and we can see how have fun with
whose
it.
pilot error is whose?
Yeah. Whose user error is worse? The machine works. The problem is behind the keyboard.
Yeah.
ID 10T.
I'm over
Yeah,
here
I did Tenty error.
playing that all or nothing Joda combo.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah.
The 3 of us are all playing Benjamin's decks, and none of us can win.
I don't know what
That was our Secret Santa exchange for the year 2023. We hope you enjoyed it, especially Magic players. Let us know what you thought. What are some combinations that you would have used if you had this special deck building rule and a $50 budget? What would you do? Hell, what would you do without a $50 budget? How would you really blow this thing sky high? What would you do if you could have any two monocolored legendary creatures be treated as though they had partner? Like I said, this is the finale episode of Season 1. Be on the lookout mid-January for Season 2. We've talked about this. We've teased it a couple episodes now. We are going to start a My Mythical Meta League where the four of us will play for achievements and try to earn points each match, based on what we can accomplish in each game. And we will be revealing mid-January our league point system so that you can keep track at home of our points and see who's going to be the ultimate My Mythical Meta winner. Anything you guys want to add about Secret Santa or finishing thoughts for Season 1?
I already have ideas for the next Secret Santa. Got a whole list of ideas that I wake up in a cold sweat. I need to write this down.
Yeah, Derek has a document of special deck building rules that could be wild and crazy.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm excited.
Randy, you want to give us a Season 1 goodbye before Benjamin's words of wisdom?
Till next time.
Benjamin, hit us with some words.
When you started doing the wrap up earlier, I thought I was going to get away with no words of wisdom today.
Nice try.
I'll refer you back to our Keep It Interesting. When you have friends and a healthy meta, sometimes you got to try something a little interesting and, tempt that power level a little bit. Go a little further and be creative with how you play with your friends. And it's things like this that keep our meta strong, I think. And so go have fun. You're probably listening to this in a new year. This is scheduled to come out January 1st. It's the time to try new things. It's the time to look at your friends, look at your family, and say, hey, let's try that thing we've been talking about. What if we took it to the next level? And see where that takes you. Go adventuring this year. That's all I got.
Adventure is out there. Thank you very much, Benjamin, Derek, and Randy. Thank you guys for being my great friends. And thank you, listener, for sticking with us through Season 1, and we look forward to more great things in Season 2. Don't forget to check out EldoradoGaming.com. Always be on the lookout for new product, and if you're coming from the podcast, you can always use promo code META for 10% off. Thanks, and have a wonderful new year. Adios.
Bye.
Later.
I'll see you when I see you.
This episode was sponsored by Eldorado Gaming. Use the promo code META for 10% off your order. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. This episode was edited by me, Travis Konishek, and our intro and outro music is by Tyler Heath of the Oh Hellos.